G'day everybody, welcome to this, another episode of the Free Kick, the AFLW Fantasy Podcast's Clubs in Days series. Today we're talking the Collingwood Magpies, and today I'm also joined by Will. How you going?
I'm going very well, thank you, Liam. How are you?
Look, I have to talk about another rival of the Bombers, so it hurts a little bit.
I'm assuming that's why you've thrown it to me.
Oh, absolutely. Never
Not
mind
that I have
you're...
any
Yeah,
inside knowledge or anything like that.
Yeah, you have no connections with the Collingwood Football Club whatsoever. Obviously, you're going to take control of this. I will sit here and be host and throw pot shots. So,
nice.
First throw to you. Can you just give us a rundown of what season 7 and season 6 looked like for the Pies?
Yeah, absolutely. So, season 7 in particular was an interesting one for the Pies. Finished with a 7-3 record, so pretty strong, but it was a pretty up and down season. They ended up in the logjam of teams fighting to make the prelims. There was 4 or 5 teams that ended up on 7-3, and they ended up losing to Adelaide in the semi-final. But the main thing of note last season was the massive injuries to 2 of their superstar midfielders, and we're going to talk a bit about them later. But yeah, Collingwood are going to be one of those teams that are going to continue to fight towards finals. But they've got a few personnel changes, which will make it interesting.
They've had a whole bunch of players, experienced players leave and some big names come in.
Some of the biggest outs lists in the game. Chloe Malloy, huge loss in that forward half. Jamie Lambert, former best and fairest winner. And long-time captain, 7 seasons, Steph Chiocci, joining Jamie Lambert at the Saints. That's a big list of outs.
I think that's rivaled only by Brisbane. I say
huge.
They're not even rivaled. It's ranked second to Brisbane in terms of games, experience, like fantasy points out the door. It's a pretty big laundry list.
Absolutely. The two major ins that we're talking about is a friend of the pod, Tarni White, who will hopefully fill one of those midfield spots. And the other major one is actually Nell Morris-Dalton, a really talented key forward coming from the Bulldogs, which the Pies will definitely be hoping can fill a bit of the void left by Chloe Malloy, but gee, it's hard to replace those big names. But as we've said, they've actually got some technical recruits, which will...
This is the big thing. Yeah. They've got some recruits coming from the injury list. And just before we get too far, friend of the pod, Tarni White, but mainly friend of the pod, Tarni White's mum, who likes almost every post that we have done about St Kilda and now Collingwood on our Instagram page. Shout out to Tarni White's mum.
Yes, thank you very much, Tony's mum, for being one of our best supporters.
Perfect segue into, Will, who is your number 1 most fantasy relevant player at Collingwood?
Well, my number 1 goes hand in hand with the number 2, which is Bri, Davey and Britt Bonnici. Both of them did their ACLs in season 7, and both of them will be coming back at a discounted price. I put Bri Davey as my number 1 in particular. She averaged 95 in season 5, which was her W Award winning season. So she's right up there with the best possible scorers, and we reckon she's going to be priced at around about 53, which to me makes her almost a must-have.
Yeah, it's ridiculous value. I would also just like to note, you've ranked Bri Davey number 1, but only because I forced you, because the next one is extremely close.
Yeah, I actually had these originally as a parcel package, because Britt Bonnici is the other one. Once again, coming off an ACL injury, capable of averaging close to 90, highest season average of 89 also in season 5. We think she'll be priced around about a 59. So those two, I think, are going to make up the midfield core of quite a few teams going into this season.
Yeah, it's actually remarkable. We're probably going to have most of our midfield made up of Sydney and Collingwood to start the year. And it's just because there's just so much absurd value in the pair of them. I do think one thing you mentioned as a reason to possibly prefer Bonnici is her consistency. Her last 3 years where she's played at least 7 games, so close enough to a full season, all of them have been above 78. And her last 2 seasons, if you discount her injured score, have both been at 88, 89.
Absolutely. She's super consistent, Britt Bonnici. She's one of the few players that really does score a lot of her points through marks, which is something I love. Gets out into space, takes marks on the wing. Fantastic stuff. But Bri Davey's ceiling just pips it for me. But I reckon I'll probably be starting with both of them, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that I agree with your decision to go Bri Davey, if only because that's a higher ceiling and she's cheaper. But I think the other thing that we really can't discount, and it's probably remiss of us not to have discussed it when we did talked about Maddie Gearin, is what do players look like coming off ACL injuries? It's not always come back really easily. And to make it even more different here, they're coming off knee injuries 2 seasons ago, and a year and a half ago. So does that kind of extra time, that extra 6 months than what would normally be required for an ACL recovery, make it that don't have to worry about that latency, players coming in kind of looking a little bit slow when they start the year? Do we just need to throw that out the window? It's 18 months. These players are going to be fully fit. They were basically training full-time at the back end of last year. Or do we need to take it with the same grain of salt and say they might come in and only score 60s and 70s because they're just underdone?
Yeah, and to me, I think at the prices they are, 53 and 59, I reckon both of these could probably average a 60 in their sleep. So to me, even if they're not hitting those super high, 90 averages, I think you can probably bank something around about a 70, which is enough to make enough money for you to get up to someone that will average that high one. So I think it's very, very low risk. And if they do come back, as you said, because they've had that longer preseason, which means they are fully fit, even better.
I also will flag as well, because I agree. I think that they present too much value, but I'm just trying to think of some reasons why, if they don't immediately fire and pop and become 80s and 90s again, you shouldn't be overly disappointed. That's kind of potentially to be expected. The other thing that I really wanted to discuss was Collingwood scoring overall. They had no player average above 70 last year, so it's worthwhile noting as well that they don't have necessarily that fantasy scoring ceiling. Now, whether that's a question of these two elite fantasy scorings not being in the side, meaning their averages are lower, or it's just a case of game style means they're not going to be an elite team this year, scoring fantasy-wise.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one, and they've basically remodeled their entire midfield over a preseason, so who knows?
Now, Will, I was going to throw to you for your pick 3, but before you even get a chance to say who it is, I'm also going to say that they are also our interviewees. So, Will, do you want to talk about the interview you got to do with the Collingwood superstar?
Absolutely. I was absolutely privileged to have Jordyn Allen join me for a chat. She is a best and fairest winner, superstar defender for the Pies. It was fantastic to have a chat with her. She's one of the best spoken players in the AFLW, so let's jump into that now. How's it going, everyone? Today we have a very special guest. We have Jordyn Allen here from the Collingwood Magpies. Jordyn, how are you going?
Good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited.
No, it's an absolute pleasure to have you. First and foremost, how was this recent off-season? You've actually had a proper extended break rather than the quick turnaround like last year. So what have you been up to?
Yeah, it was kind of a weird one because I kind of had to learn how to relax again, it felt. After 2 seasons in 1 year, it's pretty much 14 months straight of footy. It was super refreshing once I did kind of settle into holiday off-season mode. I went up the coast with my best mate. We just took our car, no plan, just let's send it. And we went away for 4 weeks throughout Jan, so that was really, really good. And then just got back into uni at the beginning of Feb at the end of summer.
Yeah, very nice. I guess the 2 back-to-back seasons, as you mentioned, was quite an unusual thing. But I guess for you, you've had a few injury concerns in the past. Was it actually good to have a bit of continuity in your footy?
Yeah, there was it was good to get a lot of games in. And I know after being a junior and you play heaps and heaps of games, then you come to AFLW level, and like my first season, we played 8 games. So it was nice to get a lot of games in, but considering I did have a broken foot at the end of season 6, I didn't, and we had 6 weeks of off season before we got into the new preseason for season 7. I was very much under the pump trying to get back for day 1 of preseason for season 7. Very grateful for the support that I had from our our S&Cs and the physios and the support staff. My foot stayed together. No more foot injuries. Hopefully for forever. Yeah. It was great to be able to really launch into pre-season and feel really strong and comfortable in my body.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And 2022 was a really exceptional year for you personally. Capped it off with your first All-Australian squad nomination in season 7. Was that continuity a part of just the natural improvement for you? And how are you feeling coming into season 8, improving on what was an exceptional individual season?
Yeah, I didn't really feel like I was playing football that I didn't think I was capable of. I thought that very much I'd started to develop into the player that I always knew I could be. I was very fortunate that the role within the club very much reflected my abilities and my strengths. So, it was nice to be able to feel like I'd finally achieved playing football as I know I could. And I maintained that throughout season 7, which is probably the part of it I'm most proud of. Coming into this pre-season, I felt it's been a little bit of a challenge this pre-season. I feel like I'm really starting to grow in areas that are making me a little bit uncomfortable, which is great, but it really feels like I've gone back to novice level in some areas of the game, and really stripping it back before we start to really build on it in the next phase of pre-season. But for the most part, it's just great to be around the girls again. And it's already gone so quickly. I can't believe we're already 5 weeks into pre-season, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things you did mention there was, that you felt that your role better reflected your strengths as a footballer. And we did see you a bit more up the ground, sort of a hybrid halfback flank wing role. Can you tell us a bit about that role change and how that might move into this new season?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I played a lot more wing minutes than I had in previous years. And I think there's a little bit of a stigma about wingers that, they sit on the outside, they get the easy ball. And, there's some games where you don't touch the footy if you're on the wing, if you're the fat side winger and, it's on the skinny side the whole game. But we're very fortunate with the structure we had at the Pies that it allowed me to have a little bit of both. And with our wing role, as you see, we're not always completely standing out in a paddock of space and hoping the ball comes out there. Like, it's very much a two-way running role. And with my capacity as a runner, it very much reflected me and allowed me to kind of in the back half of games work over my opponents and get up the field and be really offensive.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fantastic for our fantasy points as well, because it means you're getting much more of the ball as well. So just speaking of like you moving into that midfield role, we've seen in the last season that you did have 2 really big outs in Bri, Davey and Britt Bonnici, who we'll talk a bit more about in a second, but that sort of allowed you and both yourself and Ruby Slisher to move into that midfield to increase the sort of versatility, I suppose, of that Collingwood team. Is that something that we're likely to see a bit more of this season, even with those 2 returning? Yeah,
I'm sure you will. Like, we've all, with the absence of Bri and Britt, we've all added more strings to our bow. Although it was absolutely devastating to lose both of them, it did give, as you mentioned, myself and Ruby especially, an opportunity to develop in other areas of our game, which, although this season Bri and Britt have returned, I think it's just made our team all the more stronger. And the word versatile was one that you threw up then, and I think that's a great depiction of what our team is going to look like this year. Really diverse and, a really well-rounded team and players who can play in multiple roles. Yeah, absolutely. Having said that, I definitely want Ruby to go back into the back line. I much prefer to down there as the interceptor. So if you can, from a fantasy point of view, from a fantasy point of view, it's quite rare actually that going into the midfield isn't good for your fantasy points, but for Ruby it actually was. And I guess from my personal enjoyment, I quite liked watching her dash off the half back line. So hopefully she can go into the back line and kick it to you on the wing, and then everyone's happy. There we go. Yeah, best of both worlds. Your fantasy team will be really happy with that. Fantastic. So, I mean, we just spoke a bit about Britt Bonnici and Bri Davey coming back in. I'm assuming that it's a massive thing for the group, those 2 coming back in. You said that it's going to be quite a versatile midfield group, but any team's going to be improved by those 2 returning. Absolutely. And I think, like, we all know that they're star players, but I think the aspect of them being involved that we really missed last year was their leadership. And although they were still involved in a game day capacity, Bri was on the bench and Britt was in the box. There was that aspect, that disconnect between the players on the field and the coaches. And I think they're really good at kind of bridging that gap and understanding from a coaching and a playing perspective what the team needs. So and even just like Britt has come out of the gates so hot, and I can only see her continuing to maintain. Like she's absolutely really set the bar, and there's a few people who are chasing her, but for the most part, she's just on her own. She's in a league of her own, is just so motivated, and she's really manifested coming into this preseason. I think I was speaking to her the other day, and she's just feeling really reinvigorated, and it's visible. You can definitely see the energy she's bringing. She's just a new person, and Brizo is consistent as ever. We're so stoked to have her back, and again, her leadership has been invaluable in this preseason period.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the flip side of that is you've lost long-time skipper Steph Chiocci going over to the Saints, as well as a previous best and fairest winner in Jamie Lambert. I mean, you've got two pretty good ins coming in Bri, Davey and Bonnici, but has that sort of change in leadership and the change in that midfield composition been felt during this preseason?
It's definitely been quieter without Chiocci around. Yeah. That's definitely an area that we've missed, because mate, she could talk the legs off a chair. But I think in terms of a leadership perspective, like Chiocci was so good at looking after her teammates, and she had that genuine care for us all. But that being said, there's not an omission in that area with the leaders that we currently have. But yeah, and as for Chops, like she's a one of a kind player. And in terms of off-field stuff, you wouldn't really know she was there, but she made up for it in terms of the impact she had on the field. So, I think although we have lost Chiocci, the torch was being handed over anyway. And in her last season when she played with Bri, she was co-captain. So whether it would have been a sole captaincy to Bri, I still think our leadership's in really, really good hands.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess one of the things I actually did want to talk to you about with Jamie Lambert is one of her strengths was kicking goals, and you've also lost a big name in that forward half of the ground in Chloe Malloy. I suppose goal kicking has always been a bit of an Achilles heel for the Pies. So losing two of your, premium movers in that forward half, I guess what work has the group put in this preseason in terms of putting on more goals this season and adding to that scoreboard pressure?
Yeah, well, I think our game plan is probably reflecting getting the ball in our forward half a little bit more and really owning that territory. I know that Breeze's absence was felt last year in terms of how much he contributed to our inside 50s. So,
yeah, of course.
And even as you mentioned, like putting Ruby off the half back line, that'll contribute to, back half turnovers, getting it inside 50. We may see that theoretical link, as you said, between Ruby and myself getting it inside 50.
Absolutely.
But in the off season, we've acquired Ellery Morris from our VFL team, and honestly, this is a hot tip. If you haven't put her in your fantasy team yet, I would, because she is a star and just a hybrid player, can play tall and small. It's just going to tear defences apart. So look out for Ellery Morris. I think she's someone who's really going to come in and have a huge impact. And then Nell Morris-Dalton, just to complement the tall forwards that we already have in Sabrina Frederick and Liv Barber. So and the development of those two players in this pre-season phase has been really impressive. So hopefully we can, I think our Achilles heel is getting it in there. Let's keep it in there and kick goals, because, we've got the runners in Tarni Brown and EJ to, kick goals. So let's hope we can keep it in there and kick some more.
Yeah, fantastic. And two of the players you mentioned there in Liv Barber and Sabrina Frederick. Alison Downey is a big retiree. It's opening up a spot in the ruck. Are those two in the frame to fill that ruck role, or is there someone else that's taken the ruck mantle so far?
Yeah, I think we don't really have any really tall timber. Obviously, Liv and Sabs are out, two of our taller players, but I think it's probably going to look a bit more like a medium build midfielder. So at the moment, I think we've got Imogen Barnett, who's up there. It could be Erica Fowler. So I think we're still really trying to work with what that midfield could look like. But it could be, we could have 5 or 6 different ruck women on the day.
Yeah, very nice. I was kind of really hoping that you'd say it was going to be Ruby going back into the ruck, because we've had a lot of laughs about her time in the ruck back in the day.
Yeah, that's long gone. I think that's dead in the water. Yeah.
Which is probably a good thing for everyone involved, but it still disappoints me that she's refusing to go back there.
Yeah, I don't blame her. Ruck's a bloody brutal position, so
yeah,
I'm not putting my hand up for it.
I was going to follow up saying you're not the shortest player, Jordie, so you probably need to watch out as well.
As I said, our medium tall, I think I'm just maybe 1 or 2 centimetres too small to be considered.
Just enough.
Just enough to fly under the radar.
Well, you've already given us one really good hot tip on Illyri Morris as one, but a question we do like to ask is which players caught your eye this preseason look set for a big 2023? And I'll also preface this by saying last season Ruby Slisher gave us a really, really good tip because she said it would be you, and that was a great tip. So I've got big expectations from you. Who's going to break into the All-Australian squad this year at Collingwood?
Well, the first person that came to mind was actually my fellow back comrade in Lauren Butler.
Very nice.
I think every single season she continues to grow in exponentially, and I think this season's no exception. And yeah, I dare say that she's really gonna cement her position in the competition as one of the premier defenders. Like her athleticism, her smarts. I think in every single aspect of the game, she's really shown growth in just this really short preseason that we've had. And yeah, she's not pumping the brakes. So I think she'll be one of those people that'll be chasing down Britt Bonnici for best on ground throughout this preseason.
Yeah, very nice. And it amazes me that Lauren Butler continues to be such an underrated player because she was in the All-Australian squad with you last season, and yet she still seems to fly under the radar. It's crazy.
Yeah, and if you know what Wiz is like as a person, she's just the most humble character you'll ever meet. And even in our best and fairest last year, I don't know how she didn't get more recognition for her work because it's not even the stuff that she does with the ball, like her composure and her just the way that she moves the ball when she has it in her hand, but how she sets up us as defenders and sets the ground up ahead of her. She really is an invaluable teammate to have. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, that sounds absolutely fantastic, and it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much, Jordie, and good luck for the season ahead.
No worries, Will. Thanks for having me. All the best.
Thank you.
Well, another great chat, another excellent opportunity for you, Will, to talk for another season in a row to a Collingwood defender. Now, do you want to talk about why she might be someone worthwhile having in your side this year?
Yeah, absolutely. She alluded to it a bit in that interview, but she took her game to a new level last season, and a lot of that was due to spending a fair bit of time up on the wing. So she was up in the play, getting around the midfield, and her ability to take marks and move the ball with her kicking really helped her scoring. So she scored 3 70s and averaged 65 last season. Still pretty young and improving, so I think she's a really good option to take that average up over 70 and put her into that bracket of players who could be vying for that top defender role.
I agree that she had a great year last year, but I'm, for the first time, going to play a bit of devil's advocate here. And it's something that kind of we need to discuss, which is what's happening with Ruby. Because
yeah, we had a bit of a chat about that with Jordyn Allen, and it sounds like it's going to still be that hybrid midfield role. I think it might be a little bit less considering they've now got Davey and Bonnici back, but I think she'll probably be floating between the two roles. I did say, and you would have heard in the interview, I hope she's down back. I think she's probably best suited back there, and it's better for Collingwood when she's down there intercepting. But I think the problem with Slisher is I think she'll be listed as a midfielder, and that's gonna hurt her value.
Agree. But the bigger question here is what does that do to everyone else's scoring? Because Ruby was still a good scorer last year, but that was predominantly as a midfielder and spending time up around the ball. She was a better fantasy scorer when she was a full-time intercepting defender with one of the few ceilings above 100 for players who play entirely in defence. I would be concerned about not only Jordyn Allen, but also Lauren Butler for their fantasy scoring if Ruby's back there, because both of them took a step forward with the extra time, with the additional role that came with Ruby playing on the ball.
And that's why I didn't choose Lauren Butler as my player here, even though Jordyn Allen reckons she's going to take her game to a new level here this season. And the reason I did stick with Jordyn Allen is because she does play that different role to what Ruby Slicer would be playing in that backline, a bit more of a drifter up as a link player. So I think that will serve her pretty well to at least keep that average of around 65, which puts her into the better tier of defenders that you can get.
And for those of you who are confused, I think that 65 average is not including the 2 50 and below scores from the finals for
that is correct.
Jordyn Allen. So those ones, I don't think you can really take anything away from the scoring in that game against Adelaide. There were some absolute stinkers, well below average for everyone whose name wasn't Chloe Malloy. Oh, sorry. Chloe had a great game, and then everyone else really struggled to make their average. So I still think there is some cause for not concern, just if Ruby is back there, I would be very surprised if there wasn't a little dip in both Allen and Butler, because there'll just be less capacity for, if you're going to rack up chip marks, like Ruby is the queen of doing that above and beyond everyone else. So I just don't think there's enough points to go around.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And we, as you've said, it's going to go a lot around Ruby Slicer's role, because if she is staying in that midfield, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for Allen to continue getting those points. I think she can still do it if Ruby's back there, but it's going to be an interesting watch, I think.
Yeah. Well, we can now throw to someone that we have not seen play at any point. Will, who's your next most fantasy relevant player?
Yeah, this is the player that Jordyn Allen highlighted as someone who's generating a lot of hype down at Magpie Land, and that is Aliri Morris. She's looking like she's going to be slotting straight into that explosive role that Chloe Malloy filled for the Pies. So Jordyn Allen tells us that she's a very naturally talented and athletic player, can play tall and small, burst out of stoppages as a sort of medium-sized forward. So it sounds like she's going to get an early crack in the Pies forward line. As a rookie priced forward option in a pretty strong team, I think that seems like a very good option to at least sit on your bench.
I think you've also missed out the key little factoid. She played alongside the most important rookie last year, because Aliri was playing in Sydney, in AFLW Sydney. She was a teammate of Eilish Sheeran last year. And if any of that kind of mercurial, like extreme fantasy prevalence can rub off, I think that's a great name to have in your rookie black book when it comes to round one.
Yeah, absolutely. If she's picked round one, I know that she'll probably be sitting on my bench, if not on my field, as my playing rookie. But yeah, I'm hoping that she can be our Eilish Sheeran for 2023.
Yeah, I really don't have. I don't know if I can really have too many complaints about this. I think it'll probably be a slow burn just by nature of being a forward, but we've seen forwards go and become close to basically top 10 forwards, or top 10 in their line, with Tara Bahana in season 6. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility. And now we've got to talk about the most important player on this podcast, and that's daughter of Tarni White's mum at your player number 5.
Yep, that is Tarni White herself. Once again, shout out to Tarni White's mum. So Tarni White, I think, is a fantastic recruit for the Pies. She can play pretty much anywhere on the park. But having a chat to her recently, it sounds like she does want to play in that midfield, although she did, quote unquote, say, I'm just hoping to get a game, which I suppose is fair enough. But basically, my thoughts on Tarni White is, we know she can get the ball, we know she can tackle. So if she gets an increase in her midfield time, she's a really good chance to increase that average. But the other side of it is, if she does end up as a defender, she joins a mark-happy backline, which is a good thing for a defender to be able to take those easy marks, and Collingwood do it just about better than any. So I think there's a fair bit of upside with Tarni White. I think she'll probably still be listed as a midfielder, unfortunately, which puts her in that awkward price range. So you're probably going to be looking at Davey and Bonnici well before you look at Tarni White, but I think it's definitely worth putting her there as an option.
Look, I love your optimism, Will. I think Tarni White was an excellent player, particularly to start last year, when she really did kind of have free reign in that St Kilda midfield, even if it wasn't a particularly high-scoring midfield at that. I think the flag that we have to raise here is that she goes from being kind of number one midfielder at St Kilda for particularly tackles, albeit in a slightly inconsistent scoring team, to probably a third string or third rank in that midfield. And as much as we love her tackling, it's not like Britt, Bonnici or Bri, Davey aren't themselves tacklers. I would say that if we were going to create a world where we have Tarni White in our team to end the year, it is in the instance where she does play off a halfback, drops in price for a few weeks, and then we do see her potentially even as Ruby Slicer shifts back towards a defender, we see Tarni White go in, and that's where she can really bump it up again, because she does have a good ceiling. We've seen her do that at the beginning of both Season 6 and Season 7. Well, both times ceiling above 90, which is
ceiling
great
above
to
100, in fact, yeah.
Well, yeah, at the very least, like two. Yeah. I think in both of the last 2 years has gone multiple times above 90 in the first 3 rounds. So loves a bit of a cuddle to begin the year. But as you said, it's going to be hard to pick her when the two much better scoring players at Collingwood's midfield are already cheaper than she is.
Yeah, for sure. And I really struggled to pick this fifth one because, I mean, the fact that we started with talking about Davey and Bonnici just shows how excited we were to talk about it, because they're almost shoo-ins to be in probably 80% of people's teams. So I ended up just going for the fan service. Once again, shout out to Tarni's mum, and pick a friend of the pod who may in fact be somewhat relevant at some point in the season.
Look, I admire your commitment to the bit there. So I now get to talk about my special player, and I think for the first time we're just continuing on brand here. We're picking another ruck because that's the best time to talk about rucks. So I'm going to mention as my special player Imogen Barnett, if only because we've got the inside word that it's looking like she will be the predominant ruck at Collingwood this year, given that Alison Downey is no longer there. And towards the back end of the year, she was given that ruck role predominantly to herself, an average somewhere in the low 50s, and she'll come in price at 43 this year and will be coming into her third season. So kind of this time where you might start to see a bit of natural improvement, and will probably have been given a full off season to prepare to play ruck this year. I think it's just a name to keep a watch on. Entirely possible that she's the Liv Fuller, for example. Goes from this kind of mid-40s ruck up to 60s.
I also think that the thing that also makes it quite interesting to me is she'll likely still be listed as a forward. If she is listed as a forward, I think there's actually more value there than as a ruck.
That's a good point.
Because if you get her as a forward and she can start averaging, even over 55 towards a 60, for a ruck, you're like, oh yeah, that's not bad. There's a lot more ruck options that we'll be talking about through this series. But as a forward, you're thinking, I reckon that's a fair shake there.
See, I think it's more the case that there's more capacity to take some pot shots on some upside players with downside risk in the forward line versus the ruck, where there's much less capacity to find alternative options at the same price point that player ends up at. So I would actually say the main reason I like it if she's a forward is, all right, yeah, it's a flop. Given the sheer number of mid-priced potential options we're going to have forwards, I still think there'll be someone to move to.
And I think that we're going to...
You run the risk of doing the same thing again.
Yeah, and I think we're going to talk about an absolute, spate of forwards who are going to be they could be's, and we're going to invariably have heaps of misses in there, but there's going to be some hits. So, as you say, Barnett could go straight up to around a 60 as the ruck, might not. If she doesn't, there's going to be someone else to move to, such as an Abby Mackay last season.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm as bullish as a 60, but let's say there's 10 points of upside, up to a 53. That's possible, and if they get to hit an easier few ruck matchups to begin the year, it might be someone mid-price that you go, you aren't my rookie upgrade, but you're a sideways once the pricing cycle finishes, and I can jump on someone who's a underpriced primo who's gone down, and that's kind of your one on, like your hopping off point. But it's a name worth considering
Absolutely. And shout out to Bernie, who has been terrorised by Imogen Barnett in the past. So she'll know what that means.
Yep, I sure hope you do, because that is a niche reference that I don't even get. Well, on that highly entertaining note, we're going to wrap up today's episode. Following on next, we're going to have a club. I think are we doing a club episode next?
No, I think we're just going to skip that one.
Oh, we're just going to skip. They're not a football club. It's a way of life. We've got the Bombers. And so be sure to listen to that. Also be sure to check us out on Instagram and Twitter at FreeKickWPod, where most importantly you can get mine and Will's predicted best 21 for the Pies this year, and we'll be doing that for every single team as we release our Clubs in Days episode. So be sure to check that out. They'll become particularly important when it comes around to team selection time. Will, where can they find you on the socials?
They can find me on Instagram and on Twitter at WillH_VI.
And you can find me on Twitter at Liam AFLW Fantasy. Be sure to listen in for our next episode. But until then, we'll see you soon.